Namaste and hello everyone. My name is Shavika and welcome to another episode on Careers Beyond Degree. In today's episode, I'm in conversation with somebody who moved from his home country Nigeria to the UK to start a business on the Innovator Visa. We discuss everything from endorsements to writing business plans to funding to securing an ILR and everything in between. So, if you're somebody who's entrepreneurial, wants to start a business in the UK, you're sat in your home country or are in the UK at the moment, then stay tuned and keep watching because there's so much important information that you do not want to miss. Hi, Banky. Thank you so much for coming on Careers Beyond Degree. It's a pleasure to have you because the Innovator Founder Visa has been one of the most frequently asked questions to me on my channel, on my Instagram, on my YouTube. And I'm so glad I found you and I'm so glad that you agreed to share your journey because there's so much questions about the whole process, the endorsement. So before I keep talking about the Innovator Founder Visa, could you please introduce yourself to our viewers?
Okay, hi Shivika, and thanks for having me. My name is Banky, and I'm a business founder, innovator, and I live in the UK. I run a business known as Peppa. It's a tech startup that originally delivers solutions in peer-to-peer payments. And in the more recent years, we've also added in analytics, no thanks to AI and machine learning to the stack. So I moved into the UK in 2022, Q4 of 2022, after I got the Innovator Visa, which is what it was called at the time, I think, Innovator Visa. I fully got started in the UK just at the beginning of 2023 in terms of business, in terms of market fit investigation, in terms of trying to test, research, getting feedback, seeing what was catching on, what wasn't. I know you've got a lot more questions, so I'll let you lead me into the particular information that you need.
Absolutely. So, when you decided that you wanted to apply for the Innovator Founder Visa and the Innovator Visa, which was what it was called then, so when you decided, what were you doing right before that when you made that decision that let me start a business in the UK? Right before that, what was happening in your life?
I was running a business in my home country. I'm Nigerian originally. I was running this same business in my home country. I had um, a demand for a particular solution, which I built my business or our business, the startup around. And the demand was purely based around the lack of trust when people are buying from each other. And we know today that the biggest channels for buying and selling are the least regulated channels. So think about how much buying and selling is going on Facebook Marketplace, for instance. And this is more pronounced in emerging markets than you might even realize, because emerging markets were just building out the infrastructure for commerce, electronic commerce, for electronic payments, for digital payments, digital infrastructure, basically. So there was a need for that solution in my home country, which I identified and I built a startup around. So that's what I was doing. I was in the trenches of building maybe the version 2 of our current product, or so, or 2 point something of of that particular product, when I learned about the Innovator Visa and the Innovator program. It seemed very intriguing, especially when you consider the benefits that you get to learn about. So the benefits around having a global HQ in the UK, and the supposed um, acceptance or attraction for either investors or partners when you're dealing in tech, for instance, and you've got aspirations to sell beyond a single market. So that's what I was doing. Those were some of the trigger points or the incentives, or the interesting elements of the entire experience that appealed to me, that made me explore further.
Right. And do you remember who told you about the Innovator Visa back then? Or were you just researching?
No. I got to learn about it from a friend. A friend of mine had been doing some work with, I think, the British Chamber of Commerce in Nigeria. And I think it was the British Chamber of Commerce, and I think it was also FCDO. I don't know if you're familiar with that agency. I think the agency of the UK government that is responsible for a lot of foreign activities when it comes to interventions outside of the UK is usually around FCDO and a few other agencies. So I think I remember he used to either work in one of those organizations, and he shared with me the value of it. One of the days when we caught up, and we were sharing what each of us was up to in recent times, and he just mentioned, "Oh, you should look at this particular program, and these are the things that you can possibly benefit from internationalizing," which is what they usually tell you, internationalizing your business, especially for people who at the time were tech-enabled businesses. It becomes a lot more attractive if you're looking for venture capital, if you're looking for international partners, when you mention that you're a UK headquartered company versus a different market, where, for whatever reason, historical prejudices, global financial ratings, perceptions usually play a big part in whether people want to do business with you if you're from some parts of the world versus if you've got a business that is HQ'd in the UK.
Right. And when you looked at the application, when you found out and you were like, okay, let me research this, and you looked at the application, what was your first impression? Did you find it hard? Did you find it something like, oh my gosh, this is too much, I can't do it?
Well, the story. So it's very interesting. So when I learned about the pathway and the entire program, I immediately was informed about the support system around it, and this was the Global Entrepreneur Program. Remember, this was a UK government agency um, personnel. So he obviously was coming to me not just about the founder visa, he was also coming to me about the GEP. So a lot of the initial resistance that reading the documentation triggered was already taken preempted proactively by saying, look, there is a program that is designed to make it a lot easier for you. You're going to be more or less, you could say babysat, but you could say you're going to be supported by a number of people who have done it before, who would help you with reviewing the documentation, guiding you on what to write, how to navigate the entire process. And that gave me some degree of comfort. However, it has to be said that people helping you is not the same, or is not enough to get you whatever it is you need to get further, because as with every visa class, there are requirements. So you've got to ask yourself honest questions around whether you're eligible, one, or capable, two, to meet the requirements around the particular visa category or visa class that you're pursuing. For the Innovator Visa at the time, there was a capital or the amount of working capital that you needed to have, or at least show proof that you had available and you could call on. There was a few other things. Maybe you needed to register the company. If I remember correctly, you needed to register the company in the UK. Then there were a few other things, but the most stringent of it were the financial ones, especially if you were convinced that you already had a an innovative idea or an innovative business, which many of the founders are usually convinced about. Is a question of whether the person you're applying to, who's evaluating you, can agree with your confidence and your conviction that what you're pitching is innovative.
And how did you find out about GEP? Is that something you directly reached out to them, or did
No, no,
someone
no.
reach out to
It,
you?
it, it, it all came together to me. Uh,
Okay,
the entire thing came together through the same channel.
right.
The funny thing in my experience, and I guess, I was one of the earlier batches to get into the Innovator Visa at the time. I'm not very certain of that, but I suspect I was one of the earlier batches, maybe the first batch, second batch, or third batch. I don't know, but I was one of the earlier batches. So at the time, I wasn't even particularly aware of the other endorsing bodies, believe it or not.
Right.
So I only thought that the Innovator Visa was available through the Global Entrepreneur Program when I initially had my first engagement with them. And so, because they came in with that whole support framework, support shell, um, towards you getting this visa endorsement, then it seemed like there was very little to lose.
And how did you, so once you decided, okay, I'm going to apply for it, you already had a running business in Nigeria.
Yes, I did.
What
Yes.
made you decide that? I mean, you've mentioned what made you decide to come to the UK, but how did you assess that the UK was the right market for you to move and, start things over there?
Oh, that wasn't difficult. So if I take you back to the original idea behind our business was what you today call embedded finance. At the time, 3 years ago, there was nothing called embedded finance, at least not like it's called today. It was um, fintech, basically.
Yeah.
So we had a nexus between what we were doing and fintech. Now, in the in most advanced markets globally, the UK is very easily one of the leading lights in fintech, and they had adopted a bunch of very advanced, if I may use the word, methods or products or value propositions in the fintech space, which made them attractive to someone like myself or startups like ours when you were looking at um, markets to emulate, markets to learn things from. So when the opportunity came to even explore becoming a UK headquartered business in the space that we were in, it was almost too too good to turn down, right? So that fintech reputation and brand that the UK had was a very strong um, magnet, if I may use the word, or attraction for me when I was considering it. The second part of it, obviously, is access to investors and access to finance. At least this was years before years before what we call the funding winter that came about not long after, where it became much harder to raise venture funds for your business. In the time I'm talking about, it was more liberal. It wasn't as strict and it wasn't as challenging to raise venture capital. So those two things um, obviously played a big part in making the decision for me to at least explore.
Right. So take me through that journey. Once you decided, okay, I'm going to apply for an endorsement, GEP is my way forward, and I'm moving to the UK to start a business, I've assessed the market. What happened after that? How did you reach out and where did you start applying? What all did you need when you started applying for endorsement?
You know, at the risk of sounding like this is a GP promotional,
No, just the endorsement process in general.
yeah, because I say that because it always explaining it takes me back into how the GP functions, or at least it
Yeah.
functioned when I went through it. So when you start this process, you go through some initial assessment with the endorsing body, which is having a call, filling a number of forms or documentation, discussing your business for an initial assessment to be made whether it would um, qualify as an innovative business that was eligible for consideration and an endorsement. So what happened immediately after I had been convinced and I had decided that I was going to pursue it is I got connected to what is known as a deal maker, which is usually an entrepreneur himself or herself who has in the past done the same thing, which is gone through the innovator founder track in their business and had created or institutionalized their HQ in the UK. And that deal maker or individual or mentor or handler, whichever name you want to call it, but they're called deal makers in the context of the GP, then evaluates, discusses your business, gives you feedback as to whether this is something that stands a chance or not. And if it so happens that you tick the boxes for the criteria that they're looking at, what follows, or what followed in my case, was that we then started to do put the paperwork together that was supposed to be looked at by the endorsement team within the GEP, right? The leadership or the group of assessors who eventually look at whether this qualifies, whether it ticks the boxes, look at the information pack you put together, which includes your business plan. As you rightly know, it includes some summary document, almost like a one-pager about what your business is, the progress you've made, what's innovative about it, the opportunity you see, the kind of projections you're making about the market, the assumptions you're putting behind a lot of the numbers that you're putting there. And thereafter, after that, what then follows is it a yes or a no? Is it a ask for more information kind of situation, and you take it forward?
Right. And when you started preparing your business plan, did you have to prepare everything from a UK perspective, or did you use what you had already done and put that on the business plan?
So a very interesting question, and I need to give it a little bit of thought. So because I was already running my business and I was actively um, I was actively venture capital seeking because I knew I wanted to build a venture backed business. I had
Hmm.
already started working on financial models, right? I had already started working on financial models. So I had, to a large extent, a set of Excel sheets at the time that had my, talk about the balance sheet projections, talk about your revenue projections, talk about all of those different elements that feed into a financial set of financial model documents. I had them in place. So that was a starting point for me with my deal maker, because what I then did was I extracted a fair bit of the information that, based on the guidance that I had received, was necessary to show the viability or the promise, if you want to call it, of the business. I extracted it and I shared it with my handler at the time, and we worked together on it, made a few corrections here and there, The benefit that you get from having someone hold your hand or mentor you or advise you is that they've done it before. They kind of understand the things that are being looked for, and they can help you direct your application in the right way to get the endorsement that you need. And that's what happened for me. So, when I built my original financial models for the business, I was only thinking of a single market. I had to, and this is maybe more to the question you asked, I had to now rejig those assumptions based on the market and now think of a bigger market, right? Where I'm not thinking just of my original home market. I'm thinking, okay, while we will be progressing in my home market through XYZ or these particular channels, we will start to explore the new markets of the United Kingdom and maybe Europe afterwards. And based on average case, modest case, and conservative case, uh, um, scenarios, this is how it would look. And that's what we did.
Right. And before I get into the business plan bit, what is innovation according to you? And if someone's starting a business, especially for the innovator route, how do they assess if their idea is innovative?
The bar is really high these days.
Yeah.
And I feel for anyone who's trying to get on this track in 2025. In 2022, or at least 2021 into 2022, when I was getting started on this track, what was innovation at the time definitely would not qualify as innovation today. So at the time, innovation was something that was never um, done in a particular context. It could be the method with which you were trying to do it, or it could be the market that it was being done in, or it could be the use case that you were applying it to. So I'll speak in a little more concrete terms. For our business, we were solving a trust problem, and in more advanced markets, the trust problem wasn't as severe because there were safeguards in place, and there was a lot more maturity in the payment and compensation and protection frameworks that existed. So innovation in my market was that, look, what I was proposing and what I was building and what I introduced into the market did not exist before. There is a gap, a problem of trust where people are paying service providers or paying individuals who are freelancers, and they're not getting value for what they paid for, and they're not able to get refunds for services that were not delivered. So it was innovative at the time. It was innovative in many markets. It will still be innovative. Um, and it also speaks to the concept of intellectual property / patents and whatnot when you talk about it. And that's the reason why if you're patenting or protecting an IP, it's usually also geographically, um, uh, it has a geographical context. So if you wanted to patent a particular IP, that you patent it in India or in Nigeria does not mean that that patent is um, enforceable in the United Kingdom. That you patent it in the United States does not mean it's enforceable in the United Kingdom or in Nigeria or in Kenya or Indonesia, as the case may be. And that's why the definition of innovation is always going to be context specific. The context could be the geography, the context could be the time as well of that innovation, and then the context could be the particular method with which you're implementing or executing the innovation or the idea or whatever it is that you've come up with. So I hope I didn't confuse you a lot more, but it's just how it is with innovation.
No, I love that. I love that perspective where you said that innovation is not just about one thing, but it could depend on different contexts. Like it could be something where you're starting from, or it could even mean the method or the problem statement, and the solution, the way you're solving it could also mean innovation. And I think a lot of people kind of miss out on that. They stress so much about how can I integrate AI into everything that I'm doing so it becomes innovative is something that I've kind of seen a lot. And this perspective is very fresh, very new, and it gives aspiring entrepreneurs a different way of looking at the whole innovation aspect, which has become like a huge thing with the Innovator Founder out now.
Good luck to everyone, on this journey, because the uh, AI rush is making everything seem like there's no big deal about what you're talking about, right? Um, and that's pressure is now reflecting in everyone trying to force fit AI into whatever they're doing, even if it's not like a right fit, even if it's not needed, even if it's maybe a smidgen of the entire user experience, or the customer journey. So like I said, whoever is trying to do innovation in 2025 has his work cut out, especially if you're trying to prove it to other people.
Right. Getting into the business plan, how did you start your business plan journey? What did you have to look at templates? Did you already know how to write a business plan? And then something I also get asked is how much time does it take to prepare a business plan? Can I do it in 10 days? Do I need to make it 40 pages, 100 pages? So, what really is a business plan, and how should one start their journey of writing their business plan?
There is no easier time to write a business plan than today. No easier time. Um, and, you know, first, before, the GPTs of this world, the Claudes of this world came into mainstream availability, there were templates. So you could easily have gone online, which is what I did in my time, and look for a business plan template, how to write a business plan. And what it does is it gives you the outline of what you need to put in there, and it does a little bit of an additional explanation as to what each item in that outline really should be illustrating or reflecting. Today, all you need to do is to write a prompt about what business you're trying to build, give some additional context details, um, talk about the market a little bit. If you're really good at writing the prompts, I can assure you, putting together a business plan is a 30-minute exercise for the first draft, right? Now, of course, what will separate you from every other person that is writing a prompt on Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, or whichever AI assistant you use, is now whether you're just doing a wholesale copy and paste and not adding any value into it. Now that would not work for you, because what the AI assistant will give you is based on some generic um, indices that are available publicly and available from the knowledge base that it uses. The value that you bring as being the visioner or the idea owner of the business is now how you then mark it up, um, switch it somewhat closer to the vision you had, bring in some uh, unique knowledge of the market and the problem space into what you're describing and what you're discussing, that would then set you apart from any output that comes out of these horizontal LLMs that people are using these days. So to answer some the other side of your question, I had so my background is in product management, right? And before I go into product management, I did a little bit of business development work, right? And the one thing that anyone who's done product management or biz dev will tell you is that there's a lot of documentation work involved. If you've spent a good part of your career, and I used to work in corporate a lot before I even started doing startup or innovation work. If you spend a lot of your career writing documents, then you shouldn't have too much trouble writing another document that you have the outline for. So I went on the basis of the fact that I had written business case documents in the past. I had written requirements documents for products that I had built in the past. Um, Combine that experience with the unique insight I had about the problem area that I was tackling and the vision that I had about that problem area. Now wrap that up into the template that was available at the time that showed outlines of what should be included in a business plan, and then put that together to form what was a draft. Um, as you would find out in any business plan, there will now be a need for numbers. And that's where a lot of people will come unstuck, because you can't hack through numbers if you don't know how to write um, um, the the statements that are necessary for that business plan. So in your business plan, you usually will have a projection. Maybe it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years. If you do not know how to put together that projection, then that section of your business plan is going to be empty, or it will show a lot of weakness. So in my case, I was fortunate because I had done some some work early in my career with a consulting firm who had built a number of financial models for their clients. So I had some templates to fall back on to help me build the first version of what I did. And when I was able to build it, and trust me, it's not like I understood everything. So just so that people don't get scared and think, oh, I don't have the opportunity to have worked somewhere, so I don't know what it is. You know, when you're working as an apprentice, you don't always understand what and the why certain things are done. You probably know how. You might not know why and what it is. So that was where I was. I was able to build out based on templates, boilerplates that I had access to. But in terms of being able to tweak it and make sense of it, I needed help. I needed outside help. And that's where most people would need to go to. They would need to get someone who's a little bit more comfortable with financial projections, with income statements, with business models, to help them at least look at that part of their business plan. All the other parts that are more idea related, planning related, marketing related, you can almost do yourself.
Right. And what would you say are some of the must haves in a business plan? I mean, I understand the importance and we understand the importance of a financial forecast. I think everyone should include that in their business. Even if they don't know how to do it, learn it or get some help. But what are some must haves in the business plan, the idea bit of it?
Oh, that's very academic question you've asked me now. So, what are the must-haves in a business plan? I would say you've got to have a vision of the business in itself. You've got to have a problem statement, right? You've got to have a market analysis that talks about the opportunity in the market, whichever market it is that you're targeting. I would also add that once you have ticked those check boxes, um, you've got to now talk about how you intend to tackle or target or capture the market that you're pursuing. And when you're talking about the how, you're starting to talk about the channels that you would use. This is where you talk about GTM, RTM, depending on how familiar you are with those concepts. Sometimes the acronyms confuse you, but really what they mean when you say what route to market are you taking is how are you going to get to the customer that you're targeting? What channels are you going to be using? In today's world, are you going to be using social media, for instance? Are you going to be using out of home advertising, for instance? Are you going to be using content marketing, for instance? Are you going to use B2B account based marketing? Are you going to use event marketing? Because there's a bunch of different RTM tactics that you can deploy, or the channels you can deploy, and that forms a strong component of your go-to-market strategy itself, where you're also going to define who your personas are. Personas here, just to make it, dial it down and make it a lot simpler, is who's the ideal customer that you're targeting? What do they look like? How do they think? What motivates them? The more you can elaborate on who you're targeting, the easier it becomes to determine how to get to them. Because the more you know about how they behave and what motivates them, where they spend time, the more likely you'll be able to find the things that can get you to them, get your product in front of them. So I think I probably have talked about everything you should have in a business plan. But there is no under um, under uh, there's no other way to underscore the critical elements of a business plan beyond what I have just said. So if you're not clear about what your vision is about a particular venture, then you probably don't know why you're doing it. If you're not clear about who you're doing it for, which is what talks about the personas, then you probably won't reach them. And then once you've identified what that problem that the people that you're targeting are facing, you can then start to think about how you're going to reach them, what you would be saying in terms of messaging, if you even want to go into that depth in your GTM. What kind of messaging, what kind of positioning are you going to be taking? Are you going to be taking the all-in-one solution to all their life's problems, for instance? Are you going to take a more vertical centric approach where you're looking at a single vertical and solving their problems? And it helps. Again, it helps when you go through this exercise. Some of us feel like we know it in our heads, but we just can't write it down. Writing down these things really brings clarity to you as a founder. Founders love to go on guts, and we hate to do documentation. It's probably the reason why some of us ran away from corporate jobs, because we felt things are too procedural and things are too methodical and it's slow. There's value in the spontaneity, of course, but you cannot wish away the value that is in the documentation side of putting a business plan together, to be honest. So there will be some black spots you may have missed. And when you do that exercise, it kind of helps you to a large extent pick out certain things that you may have just glossed over, or not paid attention to.
I 100% agree with that. Definitely. I think that's very important. Coming to the endorsement bit, what are the prerequisites? Like, according to you, how far should somebody go who's never started a business to apply for the endorsement? Should they be trading? Should they have spent some money? Should they have done beta testing? Or just a business plan will do?
I will put a caveat to my answer. My answer is going to be based on my experience, my lived experience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's more so because the framework and the rules change a lot. So at the time when I got on the Innovator Visa track, you needed to have started a business. You needed to be trading. Now, whether trading meant loads of money was a different matter entirely, but you needed to have had a degree of the operation started. So in our case, we had not just waiting customers, we had a customer already signed up. It was a matter of us getting down to the implementation of the contract that we had signed with the customer. And the way our business was structured at the time, we had both a large enterprise focus and a bottom of the pyramid, well, not bottom of the pyramid, a smaller enterprise focus. So you could call it a you call it an up market and a bottom of the market or low market approach. The reason why we started that way was the lead time to acquiring the up market customer was so long that if all you did was chase them, you would have nothing to show until you got the customer. That's one. So for us, it was important that we also kept trying to acquire customers who were closer to the base of the pyramid, because it also helped us to refine the product, which ultimately became what attracted that upmarket customer to us, because we had some know-how of the pain points of the customers in the market that they were going to target with this product.
Right. And for somebody who's, now this is a very generic question, not related to the Innovator Founder, but for someone who wants to start a business and based on your personal experience, do you think your prior experience kind of helped you to start a business in a new country? Or anyone out of uni can just jump into starting a business according to your experience?
Anyone can jump into it. The world has too many examples of people who have no prior corporate experience and who have built out, unicorns. If you don't even want to go down the road of unicorns, who have built out solid businesses. So anyone can actually get into business, and starting a business is probably one of the easiest things to do. I think it's getting the business to the point where it is bringing in value is really the hard part. And the quicker you get to value, the easier the easier it becomes to find help that would help you keep going. And I might need to explain that a little bit more. So if you come up with an idea, maybe you want to create a grocery on-demand grocery service or whatever, just for the sake of conversation. You identified that in a particular city, people are struggling to do their gardening, for instance, in the summer, and you come up with a particular way, or they don't have access to tools or something, just for the sake of saying, right? And you come up with the idea, you register the business at the company's house, which is like, easiest thing these days with all the different ways you can do it yourself on company's house itself, or you can use all the agent platforms to get it created. The real challenge is bringing customers in. When you then convince the first person, it could take you 6 months to get the first person. It could take you shorter, depending on how much of the pain you're solving. And from the first person to the second could take you another 2 weeks or 3 months, depending on how difficult it is. So as you begin to scale in terms of more customers coming on board, you start to have access to funds that can then help you to hire, even if it's on a contract basis or fractional basis, someone with the worldly knowledge of scaling, operational excellence, sales, as the case may be. So that's why I said the more you find success, the easier it is to find help. And that help then helps create some form of a momentum that then makes your business scale.
You moved from your home country on this visa. So, say for instance, someone sat in their home country is watching this video. Ease of starting a business in the UK. What do you have to say about that?
There are no barriers. Starting a business, no barriers. Getting a customer, different kettle of fish.
Right. And any tips on that side? How to get your first customer?
Loads of tips. Start from the communities that you've got some kind of credibility with. So for many of us moving from our home countries, that means start with immigrant community to a large extent. They probably would be more willing to take a chance on you than people that don't know you, especially if you're solving a problem that impacts them. But more than anything, I would say experiment as much as you can before investing too much into the heavier side of your product. So depending on whatever the product it is that you're taking to market, try as much as possible to ask questions, to, if you can afford it, do some research. If you can't, set up some initial landing page, try and drive traffic there to see if people really like what you're saying. Um, if you do that and focus the first few months on that, I'm not guaranteeing that you will be a runaway success, but I'm guaranteeing that you will save yourself a lot of heartache, a lot of wasted funds, and you will at least know what doesn't work. So you might be able to quickly move to what may work, or you might be able to move to a different approach to the market, because the markets are different one from another.
Mm-hmm.
There are no guarantees that what was a big hit in your home country will be a big hit in the country you're coming to. And in more
Yeah.
cases than not, it will not be a big hit.
Yeah. You talked about affordability and also mentioned about it will save you some time, saving money. Now, a lot of entrepreneurs tend to invest a lot of money early on and not sure how much money they actually need to start a business. So, with regards to the Innovator Visa, how much funding should one have according to you? And how does one decide what is the initial level of funding that they need to start a business?
Okay. I would, so I might not be able to give exact numbers, but I would be able to give the category items of what you should be looking to spend money on.
Right.
Yeah, so and then for each of those things, you can decide how far you want to go, whether you want to go really wide or you want to go narrow. How do you want to get it done? Do you want to do a DIY, or do you want to get someone outsourced to do it for you? You know, there are many nuances to each of the elements of how to spend money, or what to spend money on. So if before I lose track, you said what are the things to do, if I remember correctly, and how much money should you put aside? Well, I would say
Yeah.
first off, put money aside for market study. Put money aside for market study, and put money aside for prototyping. Prototyping doesn't mean building a full stack version of whatever you own or you're intending to run. It could be a page, it could be a drawing, it could be a Facebook question, it could be an Instagram post where you would promote it and ask people if this is something that they can relate to, if it's something that they can pay for, if someone was solving this problem, if it's a problem that they see every day, if it's a problem they feel is nagging enough for them to look for a solution for. So put money aside for that. And I would say that more than anything else, that the more you spend time asking questions to understand what the market really considers a problem, the less you will spend down the line. Because once you find some signals that this is a problem, one, the next thing you probably need to start asking yourself, because it's not enough to say there is a problem and so you must solve it, is to ask what it would take to solve the problem. Who are the people who are solving the problem as well, in the space that you're in? I'll give you an example. Digital um, digital maturity or digitization continues to be one of the key points of most governments that have um, come in um, into office in the UK. How to get the digital adoption levels up, right? Um, Now you might look at that and say, wow, that's a big opportunity. What can I do? And you jump head first without really checking. So you might say, oh, in the UK, we've got only maybe 60% adoption of digital tools or something. I don't know what the current statistic is. So there's a 40% opportunity. Oh, okay. Sounds good. Sounds like a big market. Now, if the research you do or the study you do now validates that statistic, so your desktop research said there's a 40% opportunity, then you do a field research, maybe 1,000 people, maybe 500 people, maybe 100 people, and it says, oh yes, there truly is an opportunity. And you think, oh, okay, I'm connecting the dots and it's leading me down this rabbit hole. The question that many of us forget to ask is, what would it cost for me to deliver this value? Who would I be competing with? And how congested is the marketplace for this particular opportunity? And I'll explain it a little bit more. If you're serving a market that has very well-funded businesses, you're going to struggle to get your message to your customer, even if you're not a direct competitor. The issue is all of us are working through the same channels to reach the customers that we're talking to. So even when you're not competing against a Facebook just for the sake of conversation, or a Wix, for instance, for the sake of conversation, the channels that they use, which is the Meta platforms, Google platforms, are the same channels that you would want to use. And the way those channels work is that you've got to command enough budget for them to allocate the limited ad inventory to you. So while there may be an opportunity, like we just discussed, of a 40% non-adoption, you probably don't have enough budget to push away all the big hitters that would allow your message get to the people you're targeting, that would then make your business grow from step to step or customer to customer to customer. So when you're doing your market assessment, one thing I would advise is don't stop at just how many people love this problem or how many people love this solution or feel this is a problem that they need solving. Think also about, can I find a way to get to them that would be efficient, especially given the amount of money I have access to. And most founders usually don't have too much money, except you're venture backed. And when you're venture backed, this conversation stops being important or necessary.
Right. And because funding has been such or is a huge part of any startup, and a lot of people struggle with initial funding because they also have to work, and moving to the UK can be and is a challenge in itself because you have to look after your daily survival and whatnot. What are some of the obstacles you have faced in the 2+ years of running a business in the UK?
Funding. I came in with funding. I was fortunate. I got backed by Techstars. But when you're opening a new market, it's a lot more expensive than when you're trying to consolidate in an incumbent market. That's one. The second part of it is when you move out to a new country, your costs change. So if you're a single person, currency differentials will matter, especially because you're coming in with money from your own home currency, which may, compared to the pound, may not be as strong. So the money you thought you had may not last you as long as you think it would. So funding is definitely a challenge. The second thing, like I said, is and it's connected to funding, right? But it's the ability to compete in a crowded marketplace, right? Especially when you're going through the channels that most people go through today. So if you're trying to sell using digital channels, so Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, then you're competing with a lot of people. So on the one hand, you're trying to research the market, study the market, find out what people need. Right after that, you're trying to also find out if you can compete in getting to the people that you discover that need the solution you're selling. And right beside all of that, you're meant to live your life. So you're meant to pay your bills. You're going to pay rent. You're going to if you have a family, all the best. You're going to take care of groceries, council tax. If you have a car, you're going to pay your insurance, road tax, all of those things. So anyone who's considering this route needs to think through the cost side of it, just from a survival perspective for starters, and then now layer on top of the survival the business development or market development costs. So the market development costs are the things we've been speaking about in detail over the last few minutes, about research, about testing, about um, customer acquisition or trials and all those things. And when you're done with those costs, uh, you then have to think about some contingency, things that you won't plan for that will show up, right? Now, on the track of the Innovator Visa that I'm on, you're even restricted in how much outside work you can do. So, but I've learned that in the more recent rules around the Founder Innovator Visa, there's a little more flexibility as to how much work you can do and the restrictions around who you can work for, whether you can go on the payroll and whatnot. So that's a good sign. If you're able to come up with a plan that keeps you earning some money while you're building, all the best. And it's probably your best bet. If you do not have a plan and you're not able to be earning, then you need to have a good war chest of funds. Now, if you go by the um, original vision of the innovator track, it assumes that you have a business that is doing some revenue generation and so should be able to cover a degree of your costs. Yes, that may be, but the costs you probably originally had in mind were costs in a different economy with a different currency. So you've got to really think it through and you've got to prepare your mind as to what you're possibly going to be faced against. And if things change, then maybe accessing finance would be a lot easier. There are obviously a few options in the UK to access finance. They're not guaranteed, but they are there, like grants. And a lot of people talk about them a lot. So it might be something to consider. But again, like I said, all of those things are interconnected because if you go apply for a grant and you don't have a product that is fit for the market, you're likely not to get approved for that grant. So, you can't run away from the fundamentals.
Coming from Nigeria and having done business over there, having worked over there, now this is a question more about people skills. What kind of differences have you noticed once you started doing business over here? And what would you recommend to your community over there who wants to move over here and start a business?
So the difference is, oh yeah, okay. So yes, I will start this way. Many of us probably learned sometime in school about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah.
And in the hierarchy of needs, at the very bottom is survival. So you're talking, if I remember correctly, food, water, and shelter, right?
Yeah.
And then as you go higher, you start to go beyond survival into value. things around significance, how you feel like you're contributing to society. Those are the things that then become important to you. My first and most important advice to anyone coming from my home country or any country that is a developing economy is to recondition your expectation, is to disabuse your mind from that bottom layer, which is where many of us are solving problems coming from those parts of the world, and start thinking where I'm going. They most likely have solved a lot of the bottom layer, second layer, third layer problems. So if I'm trying to make a dent in the market I'm going into, I need to be thinking about challenges that speak more to people's need to contribute, need to feel significant, need to feel like they're making an impact. Um, Things they're not thinking about how to get access to their housing, for instance. There's a lot of social security welfare in place. So if you're coming to solve that problem, you're most likely not going to find a market for it. If you're coming here to solve problems around mental health, for instance, about stress, about people feeling like they they're not able to express their best selves, then you're starting to think about the kind of problems that people have here. So I usually describe it as this: from coming from developing markets, you're solving foundational problems. But when you come to markets like the UK, you're solving value add problems. So they're looking for how to get value to their lives as they are today. They're not struggling for the basics anymore. So that would be something that each person needs to do. And if you already start doing that before you come here, better for you. I've spoken to a bunch of different people, and it's a common thread. I also had the challenge where you struggle to shed that mindset of foundational problem solving, and you struggle to um, transition into the value layer where you're thinking about, okay, people don't need the bricks, they don't need the blocks anymore, they don't need a roof. And I'm using that analogy. What they need now is how to make uh, the house warm by some means. So they don't need the shell anymore. They need extra value. How can they ensure entertainment is available everywhere without necessarily bringing TV screens in there, for instance, just for the sake of conversation? So how to make sure that um, you have a good feeling when you get home, right? Those kind of things. You're not solving a problem of how do I get home? You're solving a problem of how can my home feel more comfortable for me when I get to the house? So that's one thing that all of us need to do if you're coming from that kind of market. But again, it's not everyone that's on the founder visa that's coming from a developing market. So that may not be a problem that's completely widespread. So I'm saying that for the people that are coming from that kind of market. I think you asked about the individuals or the target customers, how they're a little bit different.
Now, about the people skills. So, what's something you've noticed business wise, like when you network with people and meet other entrepreneurs in the UK as compared to entrepreneurs back in Nigeria?
Oh yeah. Well, the intensity levels are different. You don't have the same intensity level here as you have in Nigeria, for instance. Nigerians are known to be intense. We're known to be ambitious. We're known to want to move fast. I've learned here that people don't necessarily need to move as fast as you want, and you've got to learn to be patient. I've also learned that the buying cycles can be long if you're selling into enterprise or businesses. And then I've learned about the people here as well, that they generally work with, they're not, they probably won't push themselves if something is beyond their budget. So if you're selling into a medium-sized business or a small business and you're asking them to pay you £4,000 for a particular service, they would not commit if there's no budget for it. So there's a calmness that you notice around the customer here, around, look, if I can't afford it now, I'm not going to do it. Even if I know that your payment terms or your payment schedule may allow me to just pay like a quarter of it up front and then pay the rest as we go along the line, they usually won't take that that risk. So those are the things that I would say I've noticed. The buying cycle definitely is something that I've had to struggle and deal with. If you're doing a lot of B2B sales, you're going to have to be ready to spend time.
Right. And I love that perspective where you said, don't come with your foundational problems and think of solving them here because they probably don't exist here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a very unique perspective that I've heard. And I think that's very important for people who want to start businesses, especially coming from developing countries. And similar thing with India, if you're coming with problems that were problems in India, they might not even be an issue over here. And sometimes founders do tend to find gaps in the Indian market and try to solve them here, which does not really make sense. And it kind of, again, coming to the same point, it wastes your time and money whilst you do that.
Mm.
We come close. Sorry, you were saying something.
I said, indeed. It doesn't always translate. It doesn't translate.
So as we come towards the end of the podcast, you are kind of close to your 3 years now. And as we all know that there are checkpoint meetings during the endorsement process and after you endorsed, what did the checkpoint meeting look like for you? And if somebody's starting now, what should they be wary of 12 months on and 24 months on?
I think the first thing, and I think I've heard it on a few of your podcasts and interviews before now, where you've spoken to people who are knowledgeable about the process. The first thing I would advise anyone coming in is to be very aware about the milestones that you're committing to in your business plan. Many of us don't think much about it, but you need to be aware of it, because from what we've recently learned, it forms part of your success story or story at the end of the journey. So that's the first thing I would advise anyone. Be a lot more conservative in setting those goals and milestones. Don't feel the need to ever elaborate over index on what you would achieve, because you might be setting yourself up down the line when it's time for your ILR application or your visa renewal, if as the case may be. So that's the first thing. Speaking to the checkpoint meetings, depending on who your endorsing body is, I would speak to how my endorsing body has run the checkpoint meetings. They've been very cordial, they've been very supportive, at least to the extent within which they can be supportive, trying to understand how things are progressing for you from a business standpoint. If there are areas you feel they could support you on, if there are doors you feel they could help you open. I'm sure the experience or the value varies from one endorsing body to the other, because there are a bunch of, I think there are 3 or 4 endorsing bodies now. There used to be a lot more. Those checkpoint meetings usually speak to the progress you've made. First, they even ask you, and this is the very interesting one that always comes up, and it never stops being funny to me, but they always seem to ask you, are you still doing the business you got endorsed for? And I keep wondering, but again, when you think about it, you start to realize that it's very possible for a business owner to abandon that business and just say, look, I've had it, guys. I'm not doing this anymore. It's not working. I can't take it anymore. I need to survive and all that. So it's probably a valid question that needs to be asked. So that question always seems to come up at each of the checkpoints. And then progress that you've recorded in the time since your last checkpoint. My experience, the endorsing body is well aware, and I think maybe as the landscape evolves, the Home Office and whoever the government agencies that are making some of the rules will start to understand that when you're bringing an innovator into your country, the the pathway of innovation is never a hockey stick. It's never a straight line. It's usually a zigzag graph if you were to plot it. Sometimes the zig may take you back, and then a zag could just propel you many, many steps forward. But it's never a smooth, straight line on the one hand. Sometimes it could be very much like a plateau before it then goes up a hockey stick type or 60-degree type inclination. So I would say that my endorsing body understand, and they even more recently they've started to say that there might be a need for the expectations around this innovator visa to be revised, especially given the natural trajectory of business, right? If people expect that in 3 years you will be doing £1 million in turnover for a business you literally brought into the country 3 years ago, then the success rate would be quite low, because it's not many businesses that can achieve that in a 3-year period. If you even look at some of the more accomplished businesses globally, in their first 3 years, they probably didn't get much in terms of the turnovers that they were able to record. And then maybe some 6 years down the line, they seem to burst on the scene. And people don't remember that they've actually been on this journey for 6 years. And they stuck to it, and then it became a thing. And look at the I don't know how familiar you are with boats. Boats was very recently the rave of the moment as to how you can create apps just by typing in a prompt. So it's a text to app kind of platform, right? No, people don't know that boats almost collapsed, and they've been around for maybe 4 or 5 years before they finally hit what worked for them. And that happens a lot for innovation-led businesses. Sometimes you might be ahead of your market. Sometimes it might take a while. Sometimes you might need to find your niche and all of those things. So I would say that those checkpoint calls usually help you to express any challenges you may have in the progress you're making or the blockers you're encountering, and what's kind of support you may be able to ask for. It's not always they can help you. So you might just say, oh, well, look, I'm looking for access to investors. And they were like, oh, okay, well, we can only tell you about events that are happening and all of those things, but, this is what we can do for you. We can put together, add you to an investor forum that you can come pitch and whatnot and whatnot. So those are the forms those calls take. They're very tracky type calls. And obviously, I guess they keep a documentation or a dossier of how things are progressing for you time on time.
Right. And one of the final question now, as you are now going to be applying for your ILR, what is that one thing that you would advise to fellow entrepreneurs who started this journey, what can they do from day one to ensure that they qualify for the ILR? I know it's a very, very tough criteria, but is there something that they can do from day one to qualify? If not, what can they do to extend or to increase their chances of at least getting an extension and not being told you've not been doing anything, just go back?
Oh, well, first is making sure the milestones you're setting in your business plan are not excessively ambitious, right? As much as you can manage and to get it approved, make sure that there are things you can really work towards achieving. That's the first thing. Then be aware of those success measures of success that the Home Office looks at, and start your preparation early in terms of knowing which one you feel you stand a good chance of achieving. So if you look at, and who knows, maybe by the time some people are due for this assessment, the measures of success may have changed. But if you look at what it is now, you've got an IP related measure of success. You've got something about investment over 50,000. You've got something around doubled your customer count. In my opinion, I would say you should look at the double your customer count first, because if you're a business owner, then it's a good indicator of progress, and it's also a way to motivate yourself that, look, if you put in the work and you go from 10 to 20, you've doubled your customers. If you go from 0 to 2, you've doubled your customers. Of course, when you go from 0 to 2, you must be able to show that the 2, even though they may sound like they're a few, but they are, from the value of the customer account, they're significant. So that's another thing. Then there is some criteria around exports. There's some criteria around hiring. The hiring and the turnover ones are the very most daunting of the measures. And that's why, some of it may be worth looking at if you're going to lump such ambitious measures into a visa category that you are bringing for startup type businesses. You might need to think it through a little bit more. This is not my place, but it might be something worth considering for the policy makers, as the case may be. So again, just to recap, start early in terms of your business plan, ensuring that what you've got documented is things that you really can push yourself to achieve. Then look at the criteria and start working towards the ones you feel you've got a good chance of achieving. And interestingly, it's just 2 that you need to meet in that criteria. Then do your best, stick to it, be resilient, be creative. Another thing that I would do that I probably didn't do in my time so far well enough, or I would love to do more, is, and you're doing a great job, is share. Share with the world, share with, if it's your endorsing body, the progress you're making beyond just the checking calls. I guess the world we're going into now is a lot more sharing in terms of being able to speak about what you're doing. So share a lot more. And I wish everyone all the best.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And love that advice once again. As we have now come to the end of the podcast, what I've started from now on is, because I have a community of over 18,000 people, I am going out to them and asking questions about every podcast that I host and who's the next guest. So today's question, and I will be asking you one of the questions from one of the people from the community. So today's question is from Raishal Dhawan. And she wants to ask you that, can you share an insight into how to turn an idea into a viable tech product or service?
How to turn an idea. Okay. I think we've spoken about it in detail, but I'll just put it all together. I think for any idea, the first thing is to test it, right? Testing starts from desktop research. That's usually what you can do easily. Get behind the phone, get behind the PC, do some desktop research. Is this problem, does it exist? Is there anyone solving it? How can I solve it? Start from there. What's the opportunity that you've seen globally in your local market? When you go past that point, move from desktop to actual human type feedback market study. You can choose a bunch of different approaches, very low budget, where you're doing it on social media, or you're using one of the Google Forms to capture people's intent and appetite. Or you can go a little bit more elaborate and you get like an agency where you can do a focus group, or you can do some kind of set of interviews. And the outcome from those exercises usually will point you in the direction to go next. So if the outcomes are showing you that there is promise and something to pursue a little bit more, then the next step I would say would be to test with some very sketchy version of what you're trying to build. And it's sketchy, meaning thank goodness we've got things like no code tools like Lovable and Bubble these days where you can craft things quickly. But even if you can't go about those, you could just do a landing page, you could do a Facebook page, you could do, like I said, an Instagram post and boost it, or a LinkedIn post and boost it, and see the kind of comments that come from it, the kind of engagements that come out from it. If you want to run a sort of these days you can actually also run a quick poll, right? On IG, you can run a quick poll on Twitter. Those are things that you can do these days that people couldn't do a few years back, that can give you pointers. And you know, following from what you find in that prototyping phase, no matter how rough and sketchy it is, you can then invest a little bit more in creating something close to what would be like a viable version of the solution. You might decide, depending on how ambitious and creative you are, that you might start up with trying to find who wants to pay for it. It might help you. You might not always be successful in that particular approach where, okay, you identify that people want to buy this, they have this problem. Would they be willing to sign up right now with their bank cards, even though you don't charge them, committing that once this product is ready, you can come back to them and then they'll be happy to test it, or they'll be happy to just test it if it's an initial free 30-day period or 60-day period of gathering feedback, gathering customer sentiment about what you've invested time in. That's how I would do it today. It's what I'm currently in the middle of myself as well, because if you're an innovator, you obviously don't sit still. You keep testing different things as you see problems that you want to solve. So it will be the way that I would approach it, and it would be what I would advise anyone to do. Don't build first. Test, interview, try to sell if you can. Not always successful. And then if you're not able to sell, get some interest from possible prospects. And when that is in place, build a very sketchy version. Don't worry about how unsexy or unpretty it may look, and then go to market. I remember the first version of the product that we started with. If I showed you the screenshot, you would run away. You would run away. So people say it a lot, and we always, scoff our noses at when they say that if you're not ashamed of your version one of your product, then maybe you took too long. Yeah, you took too long. By the way, just to mention, we're also happy to help people, the community. I'm happy to have discovery calls with people who are on this journey as much as they can. We're also happy for them to check out what we're doing. Currently, we're simplifying analytics for businesses in retail using natural language, retail and e-commerce. So if anyone seems to be in that space and they're struggling to keep up with what's going on in their business, in terms of knowing how the numbers are looking, what the opportunities they are missing are, and the opportunities that they can be taking advantage of, I'm very happy to have conversations with people, put them on a 30-day free version of our products for them to go take it for a spin. And if they like it, they can obviously upgrade. If they don't, they can walk away. It's risk-free.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Banky, for all of that. I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Also, because it was very entrepreneurial and very focused towards the whole startup space in the UK. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And I'm really thankful for sharing your experience, sharing your insights, and all that you've gone through. Because I feel people like us who've been on this journey, it's so important to help guide people who also want to start this journey. And I'm glad that you agreed for this. And I'm also glad that you gave a disclaimer that you're here to help people discover their business ideas and move forward. Any final words?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. Our business website is at mypeppa.co.uk. That's mypeppa.co.uk. Check us out, leave us a comment, leave me a comment on LinkedIn. I'm sure Shivika will share my LinkedIn profile. I'm Banky Alao on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to jump on a 15-minute call to talk to people if we can find time on both our calendars. And I wish everyone all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.